Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Donald Trump has always been a shameless liar, but he's taken it to a new level this week with his administration's defenses of his cruel family separation policy.
Today, I signed an executive order. We're going to keep families together, but the border is going to be just as tough as it's been.
Yay! No more baby internment camps, just regular internment camps. Cool!
We're signing an executive order I consider to be a very important executive order. It's about keeping families together.
Hooray! Our hero.
After weeks of tearing families apart at the border and then falsely insisting that only Congress could solve the problem, this afternoon, the president looked deep into his heart and realized it was not there.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. The recipe for Focal Point is faith, family, freedom, and Fisher. All that on Focal Point. Glad to have you in the conversation. Program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable host, as always, Brian Fisher, and you are listening to the American Family Radio Network. Now, as I mentioned, we are using a schedule for reading and prayer that you can find at pray.afa.net, pray.afa.net. I would urge you to bookmark that page, open it up every morning as I do, read the passage for that day in your own copy of the Bible, and then pray the prayer that you will find on the website back to God. Read the Word of God and then pray the Word of God back to Him. Now, we're in Isaiah 2 through 4, and again, we are in a section of Isaiah, early part of Isaiah, where he is reporting the word of the Lord of both judgment and redemption to the country of Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah and Jerusalem. And he begins in chapter 2 with this magnificent prophecy about the future. Now, there's some question about whether this is to be literally fulfilled in Jerusalem or whether it is metaphorical for what God is going to do in the last days. You know, I tend to think that this is going to be fulfilled literally, not until Jesus returns. But when he returns, this is going to happen, which is another reason why we need to continue to be a friend of Israel as a people and as a nation, because God's plans for the future still center on the geographical nation of Israel. Let's hear what he says in chapter 2. It shall come to pass in the latter days, says the Lord, that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. Who's the he here? Well, that's Christ. That's the Messiah. So maybe he's saying the day is going to come when Jesus returns. He will set up teaching seminars on the mountain of where the temple is built, on the Mount Moriah, on the Mount of David. And people will come from all over the world in order to sit under his teaching. And you and I will probably be in that crowd that streams to the temple to sit under his teaching. For out of Zion shall go the law, or literally the teaching, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall decide disputes for many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So here are the days when we are going to experience world peace. World peace is not going to come through the UN. It's not going to come through President Trump. It's going to come when the rightful king of the universe returns and takes up his seat on the throne. Then they will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not go to war against nation any longer. There will be peace all over the world, and Jesus will settle all of the disputes. King Jesus settle all of the disputes between any of the nations around the world. Now, but in the meantime, Isaiah says, we are storing up wrath for ourselves for the day of wrath. Now, here is what the nation of Judah was doing, and here's what I believe we are doing that displease God, and the more we do it, and the more of our people do it, the more of God's wrath we are storing up for ourselves. The first sin we see is dabbling in Eastern religions. That's what he says in verse 6. They are full of things from the east, and of fortune tellers like the Philistines. Second thing is materialism, a trust in material things. It says in verse 7 of chapter 2, their land is filled with silver and gold. There is no end to their treasures. So that's a second thing, wrapped up in material things, identifying happiness with more stuff. And then the third thing is trusting our military instead of the Lord for our security. Their land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. A fourth thing is that we take pride in ourselves instead of giving glory to God. Here's what he says in verses 11 and 12. The haughty looks of man shall be brought low, and the lofty pride of men shall be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. There's only room for one person on the throne of the universe, only one room, only one place on the throne of your life. There's only one place there, only a spot for one person on the throne of your life, and it better be Jesus, or you are headed for long-term trouble. Now, there are consequences that he describes for a nation that is guilty of these sins. One is we have immature and juvenile political leadership. He says this in chapter 3, verse 4, I will make boys their princes, and infants shall rule over them. You want to know why we have such knuckleheads in Congress? Well, Isaiah is saying it is your own fault. We'll see a loss of respect and civility in social relationships. He says in verse 5, the people will oppress one another. The youth will be insolent to the elder, and the despised to the honorable. You got people shouting profanities at our president as he's walking through the Capitol. You have people sending out tweets that Barron should be ripped out of the arms of Melania and put in a cage with pedophiles. So there's a loss of civility in our culture. Another consequence of these sins is open defiance of God. Verse 8, their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. And he goes on flaunting sin rather than being embarrassed by it, rejecting God's standards for leadership. We have children ruling and women ruling in places that men should occupy according to God's standard of the church and society. And God's going to bring a day of judgment, but he's going to set all things right when his judgment is done. In that day, chapter 4, the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land shall be the pride and honor of the survivors of Israel. Well, let's go to prayer. Pray some of these themes back to God. Lord Almighty, you have preserved these words of Isaiah that we may be warned by them. I pray this day for my nation that by your grace we will be spared the judgment that fell upon Judah and Jerusalem. By your generosity our land is full of silver and gold, and there is no end to our treasuries. Our military is the mightiest in the world. In Isaiah's words, our land is full of horses, and there is no end to our chariots. But Lord, we confess that we have become arrogant and proud, and we have placed our trust in man instead of in you. Our words and our deeds are against you, defying your glorious presence. Even the look on our faces testifies against us as we do not hide our sin, but parade it like Sodom. I ask you to forgive our men for our pride and our women for their haughtiness, for walking along with outstretched necks and flirting with their eyes. Forgive us for ruining your vineyard. I pray that you will forgive us for being full of superstitions from the east. These things we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Why does AFA keep harping on the dangers of the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why? It's because we've looked into the eyes of the mother of a teen suicide victim. Patrice Bright was mom to a normal, happy 14-year-old cheerleader dealing with the challenges any teenager faces. But her outlook on life was apparently darkened after she binge-watched season 1 of 13 Reasons Why. Anna Bright chose to deal with her temporary teen problems with the permanent act of suicide. Several other teens and young adults have made the same choice after watching this show, which glorifies suicide. The American Family Association and others have pointed out the dangers of the program to Netflix. But, apparently motivated by money, Netflix has just released season 2. Our hope is to save teen lives by getting Netflix to pull the series before another tragedy occurs. You can learn more and sign the 13 Reasons Why petition at afa.net.
I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. What are gates? They are defensive tools used to keep stuff out, to keep an advancing force at bay. Too often, the enemy is successful in putting Christians on defense, when the facts are the Lord established his church as an aggressive, offensive, territory-taking body. The Lord never meant for us to sit on the sidelines of life or to cower in the corner as a result of the wickedness in our culture. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. The light of the world cannot be contained. The Lord is building his church, and the mamby-pamby gates of hell shall not prevail against us.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. We are stacked and packed and locked and loaded today. And also, our program is going to be a little bit shorter than normal today. We're donating the last half hour of Focal Point today so that this network can air a special featuring James Dobson. And I'm happy to defer to James Dobson any and every day of the week. So you don't have to go anywhere. Just stay tuned. And this program will glide right into that half-hour special with James Dobson. That's just in about 75 minutes. So stay tuned. But we won't take any phone calls today. We've got too much content to deliver and half-hour short on time. So we are going to continue to deliver content today. That's going to be our focus. So we'll save the calls for tomorrow. Tomorrow's free for all Friday. Store up your calls, and maybe we'll make a little bit of extra time for them tomorrow.
You did say any day of the week, not every day of the week, right?
Well, James Dobson?
Yeah.
Yeah, any day of the week.
Okay. I thought you said every day of the week, and I thought me and Rob would be out of a job.
Well, if James Dobson comes to me and says, I want your program 5 days a week, I'd say, Dr. Dobson, you got it.
Okay.
And you'll have to wear Rob and Jeff on your conscience, and me too, because all three of us will be out of work.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's, everybody's talking about immigration. If you've been following the news at all, following cable news at all, it's all immigration all the time. It's all children all the time. Remember, the Democrats and the liberals, they're like little children. They just get obsessed with some bright, shiny object, and you can't pry it out of their cold, dead fingers. They will whine, they will scream, they will shriek, they will holler. They will throw themselves on the floor and kick their heels on the floor. They will throw temper tantrums. They will weep like Rachel Maddow. It's off the charts, the obsessiveness that the liberals develop with whatever cause they think is going to hurt Trump. And see, they think they've got a silver bullet with kids because they can show a picture of a crying child that's going to melt the heart of every American, and they're going to want to hurt the person that made that child cry. And the liberals believe they can pin the tag for that, they can pin the blame for that on Donald Trump. And we've talked about this before. It is not Donald Trump's fault. And the law that separates parents from children, likewise, is not Donald Trump's fault. That's not his law. That's a law that was passed, and it's been applied to varying degrees of fidelity by Democrat administrations and Republican administrations. The policy itself that requires, we are legally required to separate parents from children after 20 days. It is illegal, according to the Ninth Circuit, to hold a child in detention for longer than 20 days. They got to be separated from their parents. In other words, if the parents have been arrested for breaking our immigration laws and their situation hasn't been settled in court yet, they haven't had their appearance in court, a judgment hasn't been revealed, then you have to separate the parents from the children after 20 days. And that's why I believe what we're going to wind up happening is that this executive order that Donald Trump has signed yesterday, and now they're trying to put it into effect, I believe that's going to get overturned. They'll take it to the Ninth Circuit because that's what Donald Trump directed Jeff Sessions to do, ask for an adjustment on the Flores decision with the Ninth Circuit, because if that isn't adjusted, then we have to separate children from parents after no more than 20 days. We can't keep families together for more than 20 days, and that's under the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. That went into effect under President Bill Clinton, a Democrat president. And that's the thing that President Clump, as Elijah Cummings would say, that President Trump was trying to deal with here today, that is separating children from parents. Again, it's the parents' fault. Realize this. Here's a little factoid for you. There are 12,000 children that we have now, minor children that we have now in the custody of the United States that have come across our borders and have been apprehended. 12,000. Do you know how many of them came across with their parents or even with people that claim they are their parents? 2,000. That's 1 out of every 6. So what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is only 16% of the children that are in our detention centers came across the border with their parents. The other 10,000, 83%, came across the border unaccompanied. No adult with them, no parent with them. This is the kind of thing, if a parent did this today, if a parent said, okay, I want to send you off to, you live in the West Coast. You live in Boise, Idaho, where I used to live. And we say to the child, you need to go to St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I want you to go. You'll find a center there, daycare center that's terrific. Take off. Give me a call when you get there. If we did that, that parent would be thrown in jail so fast it'd give you a nosebleed. But here are parents consistently sending their children across as many as 3 countries unaccompanied. No parents going with them, no adult going with them. They show up with nobody providing any kind of care for them. So what does that mean? That means 83% of the separations between parent and child have already occurred. They show up at the border separated from their parents. And of course, you can't blame that on anybody but the parents themselves. And the parents know the law. They know that they're breaking the law to come across the border. That's why they try to sneak in. If you try to sneak in, it means that you know what you are doing is wrong. And you know that if you're caught, there are consequences for that. So I am just sick to death of people blaming all this on Trump and blaming it on whoever when it's the parents' fault. We got to keep that. We got to keep reinforcing that message. We got to keep saying that because that is the honest to goodness truth. If there are children separated from parents, you look to the parents and it breaks your heart. We all ought to be angered by that. It'll make us furious. Let's be sure we're furious at the right people, at the parents of those children that are crying on Rachel Maddow's show. Don't get mad at Trump. It's not his fault. Now, here's the other deal. I predicted this yesterday. Remember, I told you, well, let's play the sound bites of Trump signing this executive order, first of all. Here is Donald Trump, clip number 1, talking about this executive order on immigration.
I didn't like the sight or the feeling of families being separated. There's a problem that's gone on for many years, as you know, through many administrations. and we're working very hard on immigration. It's been just left out in the cold. People haven't dealt with it, and we are dealing with it. So step by step, just like we dealt with North Korea, we dealt with Iran, we dealt with an economy that was heading in the wrong direction, we dealt with a lot of different problems. This is one that has been going on for many decades. So we're keeping families together, and this will solve that problem. At the same time, we are keeping a very powerful border, and it continues to be a zero tolerance. We have zero tolerance for people that enter our country illegally.
All right, so Donald Trump saying, like, we have not changed our commitment to prosecute everybody that comes across the border. So everybody that comes across our border, Donald Trump, illegally, he says is going to be prosecuted. This was our commitment. Now, we're going to keep families together. But we are still going to prosecute every single solitary person, every single solitary adult that breaks the law is going to be prosecuted. That's what we do. We uphold and believe in the rule of law. Now, Donald Trump talked about this last night at a rally in Duluth, Minnesota. Talked about the immigration problem last night. Enthusiastic crowd, wild crowd. I mean, you couldn't get a Democrat in the country to generate anywhere near this kind of enthusiasm anywhere at any time with anybody. I think the Democrats are in big trouble going into November. I think they're in more trouble than they know. I think the Republicans would be in a position virtually to run the table if they would just get behind their president. Anyway, here's what he said last night in Duluth, Minnesota.
So the Democrats want open borders. Let everybody come in. Let everybody pour in. We don't care. Let them come in from the Middle East. Let them come in from all over the place. We don't care. We're not going to let it happen. And by the way, today I signed an executive order. We're going to keep families together, but the border is going to be just as tough as it's been. Democrats don't care about the impact of uncontrolled migration on your communities, your schools, your hospitals, your jobs, or your safety. Democrats put illegal immigrants before they put American citizens. What the hell is going on? Illegal immigration costs our country hundreds of billions of dollars. So imagine if we could spend that money to help bring opportunity to our inner cities and our rural communities and our roads and our highways and our schools.
So Donald Trump, pretty enthusiastic response on the immigration issue. And he says, you know, look, the liberals do not care about your kids. Really, they don't even care about the kids of illegal aliens. What they care about is votes. What they care about is making Donald Trump look bad, and they will use any excuse to do that. You know, this stuff was going on in the Obama administration. This same stuff was going on under Obama. In fact, we've got a soundbite to that effect we'll get to, where the same exact stuff was going on under Obama. Kids in cages, kids sleeping under, wrapped in tinfoil blankets, piled up on top of each other. The same exact thing happened under Obama. Did you know that? No. Why? Because the media was covering for Obama. That particular fact didn't help their narrative, which is to demonize Republicans. They couldn't highlight those facts without getting their own president, the light bringer, in trouble. They wouldn't do it, so they just stayed away from it. So the American people went uninformed. I bet a lot of people that just depend on the talking snake media for their information and their understanding believe this is the first time that this has ever happened in American history. This is the first time that children have ever been separated from their parents. This is the first time they've ever been behind chain link fences. This is the first time we've ever had crying children at the border. All that absolute, total, complete garbage lie, because it doesn't fit the media that the narrative wanted to bring, which is to demonize Republicans. If it's their own guy doing it, they simply have no message. So I think it's important to understand that liberals, Democrats, progressives, regressives, whatever you call them, they just don't care, and they don't care about our communities. That's another thing that's important to understand. Donald Trump is exactly right about this. They do not care about your community or mine. You know why? Because they don't have to deal with the problems that are caused by illegal immigration. They all live in gated communities that are protected by armed security that patrol the place 24 hours a day. They've got no worries. So they don't care what happens to us. They leave us to fend for ourselves. You know, and Donald Trump says, look, they put illegal immigrants before they put American citizens. And I've made this point before, but these illegal alien children are getting better care, better treatment from our government than the children of our own citizen inmates. Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Yesterday, I shared with you Neil Postman's prophetic concerns in his book Amusing Ourselves to Death in 1985 about how modern technologies could destroy our culture. He uses Huxley as the example. When a population becomes distracted by media, he says, and I quote, when cultural life is redefined as a perpetual round of entertainments, when serious public conversations become a form of baby talk, when in short, a people become an audience and their public business a vaudeville act, then a nation finds itself at risk. Culture death is a clear possibility. In America, Orwell's prophecies are of small relevance, but Huxley's are well underway toward being realized. For America is engaged in the world's most ambitious experiment to accommodate itself to the technological distractions made possible by the electric plug. Postman continues with these words, quote, this is an experiment that began slowly in the mid-19th century and now, in the latter half of the 20th, reached a perverse maturity in America's consuming love affair with television. As nowhere else in the world, Americans have moved far and fast in bringing to a close the age of the slow-moving printed word, and having granted to television sovereignty over all their institutions. By ushering in the age of television, America has given the world the clearest available glimpse of the Huxleyan future, end quote. If that was true of the television age, just think of how it's exponentially increased with the internet, the smartphone, and social media. How do we respond? We respond by rationing our exposure to mindless entertainment, by encouraging our children to read, by having serious discussions, and by not letting the internet and the smartphone and the other technologies rule us. We should rule them, and we should limit our exposure to them. For more information about the ethics of emerging technologies and the ways in which we can creatively interact and yet not be destroyed by them, go to ses.edu. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Program named Focal Point. By the way, speaking of columns, I got a brand new one up at afa.net. You can go there right now, afa.net, be right at the center of the page. And it's on the trouble that the Southern Baptist Convention is headed toward by picking J.D. Greer to be their new president. So I got a column there about that. There's a column in the Atlantic Monthly that I read last night. It's not part of my column, but they're saying that the Southern Baptist Convention is decided to get out of politics altogether. So they're not going to weigh in on any issues that have to do with religious liberty, not going to weigh in on any issues that have to do with the radical homosexual agenda. They have just separated themselves from politics altogether. They're distancing themselves from the Republican Party, as indicated by their lukewarm reaction to Mike Pence, at least lukewarm on the part of leadership. So I encourage you to read my column, especially if you are a Southern Baptist, to read this column and maybe share it with others in the Southern Baptist Convention. If you go to a Southern Baptist church, share this column and see what you think. Maybe you disagree with me. I'd be glad to hear from you if that is the case. By the way, here is another factoid related to President Trump's zero tolerance policy. All border crossers are criminally prosecuted. This is an article, Breitbart.com. That policy is deterring foreign nationals from entering the country illegally. A new report by BuzzFeed News reveals how foreign nationals are now having second thoughts before traveling to the U.S.-Mexico border and crossing illegally with their children thanks to Trump's immigration crackdown. So the word is getting out that they're prosecuting everybody that comes across the border. They're not getting away with anything, and they run the chance of being separated from their children. I saw a mother interview this morning on CNN. Says, I'm not going to take a chance on being separated from my children. I'm not going to try to cross the border because I want to keep my family united. I know that could be one of the consequences if I do. But anyway, we were talking about the reaction to Donald Trump's policy and a couple other items I want to mention before we move forward that are tangentially connected to this. Donald Trump this morning, he was on a tweet storm, and he was attacking the Republican Party for what he called this stupid fake-a-buster. That's his word, and he's right about this. It is moronic. It's lunacy for the Republican Party to maintain this stupid fake-a-buster. This is the one where the Republicans, it's not a law, it's not in the Constitution anywhere, they have hamstrung themselves by allowing the Democrats to filibuster just by raising their hand. You know, filibuster originally referred to unlimited debate, which we all support. Somebody's got a point to make. I want everybody to make their point best they can before we go to the vote. That's only fair. But at some point, everybody said what they have to say, then you go to a vote. Well, not with the Republicans around. They have maintained a policy that allows the Democrats to put off a vote as long as they want. And so they can table a legislation, just 9 of them. It takes 9 Democrats now. You got to get 9 Democrats to pass anything. The chances of getting 9 Democrats to agree with and support any Republican proposal, including on immigration, are nil. Those chances do not exist in any rational world, which means there is no immigration bill. Listen to me now. There is no immigration bill. There is no good piece of legislation that has a chance of getting through the Senate. Not a chance, not a scintilla, not an iota of a chance of getting through the Senate. So that means the only stuff that's going to get through the Senate is so bad that it gets at least 9 Democrats to vote for it. That means it's got to be a horrendous piece of legislation. It's got to be an absolutely terrible piece of legislation. So Donald Trump is right to get on the case of the Senate for this. They could change the rules today. Ladies and gentlemen, they could change that rule in the next half hour if they wanted. It only takes 51 votes to change the rules. You know how many votes they have? They got 51. They could unhamstring themselves today. I saw Bob Thune on Fox News this morning. He's not about to budge. He's like second or third in command in the Senate. He's a good guy, went to Biola University, strong Christian, but he's as blinded on this issue as everybody. So he's defending this stupid fake-a-buster and is completely bottling up the chance to get the good things on Donald Trump's agenda, President Trump's agenda moving forward. So we got to keep the pressure up. I mean, every time you see or communicate with your senator, talk to him about this stupid fake-a-buster. Tell him, get rid of the stupid fake-a-buster. It's killing us out here. And that is exactly right. Now, back to the immigration thing for just a minute, talking about illegal aliens coming across the border and filtering into our workforce. Every year, there are 4 million Americans that turn 18. They turn 18 every year and go in to the workforce. They're looking for good jobs in the free market. But realize at the same time, the government is providing green cards to 1 million legal immigrants and issuing temporary work permits to 3 million foreign workers. What is 1 plus 3? It's 4. So these people that are being showered with these green cards are competing with our 18-year-olds for good jobs. And then on top of that, you've got all the illegal immigrants flooding the border that aren't even being counted, and they're competing with the same people for the jobs that are out there. You know, we talked about this episode last night at this Mexican restaurant where these people surrounded Kirstjen Nielsen, the director of Department of Homeland Security, and shouted at her, shame, 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 used profanity and all that kind of stuff. Went on for 10 minutes, finally drove her out of the restaurant. And the owner of the restaurant today defended what they did. Let me find that story. She defended what they did. She was excited about it. She was happy about what they did. Let me get to that story. It's in here somewhere. And I got 2 little factoids on that. Number 1 is the restaurant manager is happy about what happened. That's a quote. We are happy about what happened. That's from the manager of the Cocina Mexicana. That's the restaurant manager. We are not upset, this is a quote, We are not upset the protesters came here. We're not upset even if it was any of our staffers who tipped off the protesters. We are happy about what happened. And then it turns out, you have any question about whether there's still bias at the Department of Justice? Check this out. One of the activists who chased Kirstjen Nielsen out of this Mexican restaurant Tuesday night is an employee of the Department of Justice. She belongs to the Democratic Socialists of America. She is a paralegal in the DOJ for the Trump administration. And she said this. She's not apologetic about participating in this thing. She said this, quote, anyone who sees Kirstjen Nielsen at dinner, anyone who sees anyone who works at DHS and ICE at dinner can confront them like this, and that's what we hope this will inspire people to do. Now, she was defending her action on the ground. This was on her own time, but there's a tweet I'm looking at right here that was sent at 1:56 p.m. yesterday afternoon. She's on the clock at 1:56 p.m., so she's not doing this on her own time. And she said this, keeping families together in jail is not an acceptable solution. Now, speaking of it being selective about who, about what happened under the Obama administration, all I got to do is find my rundown here. Let's go to clip number 3. This is kind of humorous to watch. This is Brooke Baldwin talking to Senator Tammy Baldwin, no relation. And I think Tammy Baldwin was completely caught off guard by this. You know, Tammy Baldwin's being interviewed by somebody from CNN. This is home territory for them. What she's expecting are softballs. That's all she's thinking she's going to get. And everybody else is getting blazing fastballs, 102 miles an hour. She's going to get a little softball tossed underhanded at her. And instead, Brooke Baldwin kind of bore down on her about whether she was as exercised when the same stuff was happening under President Obama. And listen carefully and see if you hear an answer in this anywhere from Senator Tammy Baldwin.
They were all there in 2014 under President Obama. And my question to you, Senator Baldwin, is did you speak up against them then?
You know, on this issue that we get into a moment where we're making progress, and then when it stalls, we turn around. I think we all need to continue to be focused on it and press it through. The American people need confidence that we can solve problems. Nobody believes that we have an immigration system that works. It is broken, it needs fixing, but we've just got to resolve to do that.
But were you worried about it then? Did you raise your voice under the Obama administration?
You know, in numbers of cases, usually I remember a constituent who was in detention at the border, arguably very inappropriately, and we raised our voice in that instance and many others. But that's we've got to do this now in unison.
Oh, so the talking point, we got to do this in unison. That's my answer to every question you ask, Brooke Baldwin. If you don't like my answer, we got to do this in unison. You better ask me a different question.
When I cut up that clip today, I laughed out loud.
Isn't that funny?
It was just circle, 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 no answer.
Yeah, and Brooke Baldwin. Remember Allison Camerota, same network, when she had Mo Brooks on.
Yeah.
I mean, she just hammered him with the same question like 6 or 7 times. We had that montage of all the times where she hammered Mo Brooks because he wasn't answering her question. And here Brooke Baldwin makes a feeble attempt, asks the question twice, and realizes I'm about ready to offend a member of my own team. It's time for us to move on. You know, one of the things I predicted yesterday that would happen is once Trump issued this executive order to keep families together, and remember, he's not backing away from the prosecution at all. Good for him. And ladies and gentlemen, what we're seeing with Donald Trump, we're seeing what happens when you set out to change things and you don't back down. Now, Donald Trump, frankly, in my judgment, backed down yesterday. He capitulated to the left on this family unification deal, because that's what the left was clamoring for, and he finally yielded. Even his own wife was on him to change it. The last 4 first ladies who are alive, all of them condemned the separation of children caused by the parents, not by President Trump. But I told you before the show was over that all we're going to hear now from the left is now you're detaining whole families. Now you're putting entire families in detention. This is unacceptable. We don't imprison whole families in the United States of America. So it just proves there was no point, and they're doing it. I'll illustrate when we get back. No point for Trump to do this in the first place. Be right back.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Culture is a product of us being placed in a particular location, and it is God's desire that his light bearers would culture or cultivate a particular area.
Join Abraham Hamilton III as he presents the biblical case for cultural engagement. It's a powerful video resource from the American Family Association's Cultural Institute series.
You and I create the culture of our country.
Visit afastore.net.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for a health care plan, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called Medi-Share. Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, Medi-Share members have shared more than $2.5 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with Medi-Share. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings may be less or more, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join Medi-Share anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Just hit *345. That's *345. *345.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Again, my apologies. We're not going to have time for phone calls today. Our program will be shortened by a half an hour as we generously donate a half hour of our time for a special program featuring James Dobson here on American Family Radio, part of our In God We Trust series. So stay tuned. That program will be starting in just 45 minutes. You will not want to miss that. Now, as we mentioned, the first thing was going to happen is people were going to start jumping all over Trump for imprisoning now, detaining entire families. And that's exactly what's happened. And it's not just Democrats. I mean, I'm not happy about this either, because now you're going to, oh man, you talk about going from bad to worse. Now you're going to have children in jail cells, because you have to have something sturdier than a chain link fence around cafeteria tables and pool halls and gymnasiums to hold male detainees. So the children are going to have to be put in a place that's secure enough to secure their criminal fathers, their criminal parents. So now they're even going to be in worse situations, more dicier situations than they were to begin. That's why Donald Trump never should have done this. It was just rank capitulation. He just gave in. He folded. And then as soon as he folded, he's getting demonized for endangering entire families. It was as predictable as you could get. Anyway, here, let's listen to Kellyanne Conway interacting with Chris Cuomo on CNN, clip number 4.
The first is, if you cannot establish a familiar or custodial relationship between the adult and the minor, we have a 315% increase in the last few months alone in fraudulent cases. Children being smuggled, presenting as a family. You've got to care about these children also. The second reason that you would separate a minor from an adult is if you feel like that child could be harmed. You see sometimes these children clearly don't want to be with the adult man they're presenting with, and you need to find out why that is. And the third reason is that if the adult has broken the law and entering the United States and now will be prosecuted, you can get to a port of entry and present for a credible fear asylum case. And the Secretary of Homeland Security is reminding everyone today to do that. Go to one of the ports of entry and present the credible fear case.
And if you go to one of the ports of entry and put in your claim for asylum, as a family, you will be kept together while your asylum request is being processed. Why can we keep your family together if you go to a port of entry? Because you aren't doing anything illegal. You're not breaking the law. So you can keep your whole family together. So if you break the law, you may be separated from your children. That will be your fault. If you don't want to be separated, then don't break the law. This is not rocket surgery. Because somebody breaks the law in America, you will be apprehended, you will be prosecuted, you will be held until you can get bail, then you will be tried. If found guilty, you'll go to jail, and you will be separated from your children. And nobody would argue that that's anybody's fault but the criminal himself. But if you want asylum in the U.S., you can start in your own home country. You can start in the first country you get to where you have no fear of violence. You can do it in Mexico if you get to Mexico. You know, we saw yesterday, Jeff did the research, 9 consulates in Mexico, including several right on the border, where you can go and put in a request for asylum, and it'll be prosecuted. You won't. It'll be investigated. It'll be pursued. It'll be processed, and you won't have to fear being separated from your family. But you break the law, everybody knows by now that you will be prosecuted, and that's having an actual deterrent effect. Now, the problem that I see is we are creating an incentive now. What Donald Trump has done is created an incentive for entire families to break the law, because the President of the United States has promised these families that under no circumstances will they be separated as a family. They will be able to stay together through no matter what happens. So that's an incentive now. These families hear this. They look, we can all go. Come on, children, pack into the VW. We're heading to the border because the President of the U.S. says we get to stay together no matter what we do at the border. And again, that's, I think, is a mistake for Donald Trump to capitulate on this, but it's too late now. The deed has been done. You know, and Kellyanne Conway saying, look, here's when we separate children from adults. Number one, when you have fraud, when the adult that's presenting at the border is obviously not the parent of the child, and they have clues that they look for when they talk. They can see how comfortable the child feels with the older man, how uncomfortable. They can read the body language. They can see the fear in their eyes. They can see that the adult male can't answer basic questions about the child, how old he is, when is his birthday, what's his middle name, stuff like that. They have no idea what the answers to those questions. So you know you're dealing here with fraud. And remember, we're dealing with fraud in 83% of the cases of these children. 83%. 12,000 children in detention. 10,000 of them came as unaccompanied children or as instances of fraud. So, you know, you want to protect those children because they're with somebody that they're afraid of. So you got to separate them because you care about the children. And then the third reason you separate them is if they've broken the law and they got to be tried as an adult. And you do not want to put children in an adult prison. You don't ever want to do that. I mean, that is child endangerment because of the kind of people that are in our prison system, that are in adult detention centers. You're going to get bad actors in there. I mean, they're in there because they broke the law. They're in there because they're criminals. Why would you ever want to put an innocent, vulnerable child in an environment like that? Way, way too risky. But Donald Trump's now kind of made it obligatory to do that. Clip number 5. Here's a second exchange between Kellyanne Conway and Chris Cuomo.
I only wish that you would play the audio tape, the videotape, that CNN would do a surround sound program of the hundreds of thousands of Central American minors who have come over the border into this nation over the last several years. We don't know where they all are. Do you? Does CNN know that those girls haven't been drug trafficked, sex trafficked? Do you know that they're with adults, family members, people who love them? Do you know that they're alive? So you can play all the audio tape and videotape you want. You show me what happened to each and every one of those girls. Why were the girls the ages of your teenage daughter and my teenage daughter, excuse me, getting birth control injections because they faced almost certain rape?
Listen,
so if we want to talk about children, we need to talk about all children at all times.
There's no...
All right, so Chris Cuomo didn't want to talk about that. You know, so Kellyanne Conway asked a very good question. You know, we have had hundreds of thousands of children from Central America. I mean, they've come to the United States in different ways, on the top of trains and at the hands of smugglers. And remember, we've got an immigration law. I think it's talk about another stupid rule. We've got an immigration law that says if an immigrant comes to our border and sneaks in from a non-contiguous country, the only contiguous countries to the United States are Canada and Mexico. So somebody gets here from Central America, from Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, and they sneak into the country, even if they're apprehended because they are a non-contiguous nation, they cannot be deported. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a stupid, you can't deport them. And I don't know where that rule came from. That's another law that needs to be revisited. So you got to just keep them here and do something with them. You know, and Kellyanne Conway's point is, you know, we've had hundreds of thousands of these children from South Central America, and once they get here, everybody loses track of them. You know, the left was beating Donald Trump upside the head because he lost track of, 1,500 kids? Hadn't lost track of them. They'd been placed with family members or adult relatives. They just didn't show up for their court date. So they weren't misplaced. They'd snuck off. They disappeared. They refused to respond to a legally valid court order to show up in court. And now we're looking at hundreds of thousands of Central American children. And Kellyanne Conway's point is nobody cares about these kids. Nobody has any idea where they are. Nobody has any idea whether they're even alive. Nobody has any idea how many of the girls that came across, of these hundreds of thousands, were sex trafficked and that kind of stuff. They just don't know. So again, the point I'm making is, man, liberals just don't care about kids. They really don't. They're just pawns to them. You know, Jeff showed me a cartoon yesterday of the illegal immigration, big giant hand, and then there's this chessboard, and then there's a little tiny Mexican girl who's a pawn on the board. Smallest thing on the board, and this big hand is reaching down to snatch her. They are just pawns. They don't care about them really at all. They're just using them for their political agenda, which is to get votes for their agenda. But I think Rand Paul has the same objection that I have here, clip number 6. Let's listen.
And I think children in an area where people are being detained for illegally coming across the border, there's always the possibility that some of the people being detained could either be smugglers of drugs, sexual traffickers. And so really in all of our system of incarceration throughout the United States, we don't ever put children with adults. Now, I understand the emotions of this, and I think we should look for a solution, but I don't think everybody should say, oh, we're doing this, or people are doing this on purpose because they want to separate the kids. I think people truly do and are concerned about the safety of the children and how you have children mixed in with adults. Some of the adults aren't their parents, and some of the adults, frankly, aren't good people. And I think the other thing is this fits into an overall immigration question we have to ask. Do we want to tell everybody in Central America, load up a kid or two, cross the desert, which is really essentially child abuse because people die in the desert, and then try to come into the country? It's not what we want, it's not what we can handle, and it's not the appropriate way.
Now, I'm with Rand Paul on this one, and we're going to hear, after we come back after the news, we're going to hear from a Democrat basically saying the same thing, only using hyperbolic, hyperventilating language to do it. Nancy Pelosi chiming in, too, as a Democrat. But he said, look, we just don't put children in with adults. By the way, Rob, how do you say the word adult? How do you say it?
Adult.
How do you say it?
Adults.
How did Rand Paul say it? Adult.
Adult.
You know it's adult every time? We don't put children in with adults.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a Kentucky thing or what that is. But anyway, that's completely beside the point. I just wasted precious time on that little nothing burger. But anyway, I think Donald Trump, got coerced. He got pressured into this. He capitulated under pressure. And I think it's going to be bad for children and expose them to additional risk. Listen to Focal Point on American Family Radio. We'll be right back after the news. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Secular progressives in the United States have worked to alter the very nature of our republic.
For the progressives, there are no longer any God-given natural rights.
AFA Executive Vice President Ed Vitagliano helps you understand the progressive threat to the American Republic. Get your copy of this powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute at afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. First Lady Melania Trump has paid a visit to a facility in Texas that houses 58 unaccompanied children that illegally entered the U.S.
We all know they're here without their families. And I want to thank you for your hard work, your compassion, and your kindness.
The First Lady's visit comes amid the controversy over the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy and the recent executive order from President Donald Trump that he says will end the separation of families caught in the U.S. illegally. The House is expected to vote today on a pair of immigration bills. All eyes will be on Congressman Mark Meadows of North Carolina and House Speaker Paul Ryan, as Meadows was caught on camera yesterday giving the Speaker an earful. Speaking today on Sandy Rios in the Morning on AFR Talk, Washington insider Rachel Bovard of the Conservative Partnership Institute said the shouting match involved immigration.
So in my conversations with Mark Meadows' staff, that seemed to be about whether or not Paul Ryan was going to stick to the deal that they had agreed to, the Freedom Caucus and his office, and that was that these two bills would be brought to the floor. Allegedly, Speaker Ryan was trying to weaken that Goodlatte bill in an effort to sort of, he's not whipping it anyway. This bill, he's not putting the weight of his office behind it to pass, but he was trying to weaken it further, and that was what the shouting match ensued about on the floor, was whether or not Paul Ryan was going to stick to his commitment to the Freedom Caucus on this issue. My understanding is they met later, and he will bring the Goodlatte bill to the floor.
More immigration news at onenewsnow.com. The Supreme Court has upheld a South Dakota law that requires internet retailers to collect and pay sales tax from South Dakota residents, even if the internet retailer does not have a physical presence in the state of South Dakota. Thursday's ruling overturns a previous decision that said states could not tax entities without a physical presence in its borders. Andrew Moylan of the National Taxpayers Union Foundation is disappointed in the ruling.
Ultimately, the issue before the court was whether or not states were going to have the ability to enforce their taxes on out-of-state businesses. And I thought that was a terrible idea and a terrible precedent to set. Unfortunately, the court disagreed, and they said that states are going to be free to do that. My worry is that this is going to really undermine the vibrant ecosystem of internet commerce that we have today, that particularly small and medium retailers may have trouble as states start targeting online transactions for taxes. And so, that's a concern. And luckily, the court did at least indicate that it recognizes that risk, but we'll see whether or not states recognize that risk as they respond to this.
The National Retail Federation applauds the ruling, saying this will result in a level playing field and help brick-and-mortar stores compete in today's marketplace. Summer is finally here, and Fox's Jeff Manasso reports safety experts want parents to be vigilant.
World Against Toys Causing Harm says it can't stress enough that parents constantly think about child safety this summer, especially when it comes to pools, big or small.
When it comes to drowning, it can happen in a moment. It's usually silent.
Watch as Joan Siff says water balloons, high-powered water and projectile guns, and slingshots cause choking and eye injuries, and drivers can't always see low-riding big wheels. Watch says 2.5 million children will be treated in the ER this summer, when nearly half of all child injury-related deaths will occur. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And it's not how much a woodchuck could chuck, it's how many flags it can swipe. Authorities say the furry creatures, and not vandals, are probably to blame for the disappearance of American flags from veterans' graves in Massachusetts. The flags at Bellevue Cemetery in Adams were first reported missing earlier this month. Residents volunteered to replace the flags by hand, but then those went missing too. Police were called to investigate, and the chief told the Boston Globe that officers found evidence that a woodchuck is probably using the flags in its burrow. That is American Family News for this hour. For more news and information, visit onenewsnow.com.
American Family Radio presents a State of the Union address featuring well-known Christian leader Dr. James Dobson.
Until we began to move back to the spiritual and moral understandings with which our founding fathers brought to this wonderful nation a constitution based on biblical understandings, until we return to that, we're going to have a lot of trouble.
Listen this afternoon at 2:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Donald Trump has always been a shameless liar, but he's taken it to a new level this week with his administration's defenses of his cruel family separation policy.
Today, I signed an executive order. We're going to keep families together, but the border is going to be just as tough as it's been.
Yay! No more baby internment camps, just regular internment camps. Cool!
We're signing an executive order I consider to be a very important executive order. It's about keeping families together.
Hooray! Our hero.
After weeks of tearing families apart at the border and then falsely insisting that only Congress could solve the problem, this afternoon, the president looked deep into his heart and realized it was not there.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio, the home of ethanol-free radio, nothing but high-octane fuel in the USS Focal Point. Glad to have you in the conversation. Focal Point, the program, and the American Family Radio Network is the network. Couple of quick items in case you don't have time to get to these tomorrow. You know that there are more, this is according to estimates, there are more tigers that live in U.S. backyards than live in the wild. Wow. Yes, you read that correctly. The population of tigers in people's backyards in the U.S. outnumbers those in the wild. 7,000 of the big cats live in U.S. captivity, whereas, despite increases, there are as few as 3,890 wild tigers worldwide. In some states, TheGuardian.com says, it's easier to buy a tiger than to adopt a rescue dog. I'll tell you, this is a little secret. Well, I'm not a secret. I don't care who knows it, but I don't even like going to zoos, man. And I'll tell you why. I hate to see lions and tigers caged. I mean, it just bothers me to see that. These are lions. These are animals that are designed to roam and to prowl and to run, and we got them caged up. I mean, I just sink in my heart when I see that. So anyway, that's why I don't go to zoos. I just go to my neighbor and see the tiger in his backyard. Let's see. Big problem in the World Cup, by the way. Mexican football fans are very fond of a particular homophobic chant.
Oh.
And every time the goalie sets up to do a goal kick, you know, where the ball is set down and then he kicks it into play, they shout in unison this homophobic rant, this homophobic epithet. And the FIFA officials, those are the people that run the World Cup, they're trying to figure out how they can shut that thing down, not having much success to this point.
Also, the World Cup is causing beer shortages in Russia. Did you read that?
I read that they're running out of carbonated water, too, running out of carbonation.
I don't know about that.
But they're having beer shortages. Yeah. Well, I guess that tells you something about the typical soccer crowd.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we were talking at, and my point here, I got one point in this segment. We got some other content I'm going to give you, but one point in this segment is that it is pointless. It is useless. It is worthless to cave into the left. There's no percentage in it. You don't gain anything by it because as soon as you capitulate, as soon as you cave in, they start beating you about the head and shoulders for something they're blaming you for now that you capitulated. Now here is Eric Swalwell. This is clip number 7. He's a Republican from California, and they like him on cable TV because he's a good-looking guy and he just rips Trump every chance he gets. Now listen to this hyperbolic rhetoric on his part. This is a guy now that up until yesterday afternoon was clamoring that it is horrifying instance of child abuse to separate parents from children. We can't tolerate this. This is un-American. This must be fixed. Donald Trump has no heart. He keeps children separated from... Same guy. Now, here's what he's saying. Now that Donald Trump said, okay, I'm going to do it your way, Eric, we're going to keep families together. Here's what Eric Swalwell says.
This could lead to family internment camps, Wolf, and that is what we do not want to see. And the way to avoid that is to still follow that Flores decision, which is a humane decision that does not want people in camps like this indefinitely, but also to put the judges down there to allow the Border Patrol agents to process the evidence and have courts that are open so that we can make decisions as to whether there are lawful asylum cases or not, and allow the families to stay or to go. But indefinitely keeping them there is no better than separating children from their parents.
All right, so now Eric Swalwell, same guy that was just moaning and whining and complaining, prowling around like a ticked-off cheetah that we're separating children from families. Now he's saying, now that Donald Trump fixed that problem, oh no, now we're leading to family internment camps. Instead of just interning the adults who committed crimes, now we're treating the children as criminals, and we're keeping them all in internment camps. So that's Eric Swalwell. You know, Nancy Pelosi said basically the same thing, that Trump is setting the stage for long-term incarceration of families. So my point is it's just pointless to capitulate to the screaming and the whining from the left. It's like giving in to a 2-year-old that throws a temper tantrum in Kroger. You're just incentivizing temper tantrums. They've learned that that's the way to get what they want. So when you give in, it just empowers them, and they learn to use that. That's a technique that they can use to get you to bend to their will rather than stand for what is right. So you can't ever satisfy these people. No way to do it, so don't even bother to try. Now, let's see if I got some more information on the immigration. Oh, I love this. I came across this story. I got this off the ACLU website, believe it or not. Now, listen to this, because there's a punchline here that you won't see coming. New report, headline from the ACLU. New report is based on thousands of government documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act that detail horrific stories. Documents obtained by the American Civil Liberties Union featured a new report released today that show the pervasive abuse and neglect of unaccompanied immigrant children detained by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The report was produced in conjunction with the International Human Rights Clinic at the University of Chicago Law School. Quote, these documents provide a glimpse into a federal immigration enforcement system marked by brutality and lawlessness, said Mitra Abdullahi, ACLU Border Litigation Project staff attorney. Quote, all human beings deserve to be treated with dignity and respect regardless of their immigration status, and children in particular deserve special protection. The misconduct demonstrated in these records is breathtaking, as is the government's complete failure to hold officials who abuse their power accountable. The abuse that takes place by government officials is reprehensible and un-American. The report is based on 30,000 pages of documents dated, wait for it, get ready for it, documents dated between 2009 and 2014. Uh-oh. All of this abuse, all of this reprehensible brutality and abuse of children happened under the reign of the glorious one, Barack Obama. And they have specific examples of cruelty to children. You know the reason you just heard about that for the first time today? The talking snake media. They lie to you even by what they don't tell you. So you never knew that, did you? I never knew that because the mainstream media is not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Now, there are a couple of immigration bills that are going to be voted on this afternoon in the House. And here's the main thing that you need to know about this. You might have read about the shouting match between Mark Meadows and Paul Ryan. I watched the video of it, and they got pretty animated. And the problem was, this is what Mark Meadows was upset about, is that the Republican leadership had fiddled with the Goodlatte bill. It was a good immigration bill. They had promised Mark Meadows and the House Freedom Caucus that they would bring that bill as one of the two bills for vote this afternoon. They didn't do it. They changed it. They took the heart and soul out of that bill and didn't tell anybody. Mark Meadows had just found out about it, and he was rightfully furious. Be right back. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
20 states have sued the United States, saying the constitutionality of the Obamacare mandate to be insured rests on the penalty being called a tax. But when Congress zeroed out the penalty in the tax reform bill, that made the Affordable Care Act unconstitutional, say the states, because the mandate remains but no taxes are being collected. On June 7th, the Trump administration agreed. In a memorandum, it said it will not defend the law in court. It wrote, "The United States agrees with plaintiffs that the ACA's individual mandate, as amended by the tax bill, is unconstitutional. The administration has asked the court to declare it so." Let's hope they do.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for a healthcare plan, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called Medi-Share. Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, Medi-Share members have shared more than $2.5 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with Medi-Share. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings may be less or more, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join Medi-Share anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Just hit *345. That's *345, *345.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Last segment of the day. Remember, my apologies, no phone calls today. Too many stories, too little time. We're donating the last half hour of our program, starting in about 15 minutes from now, to an American Family Radio special featuring James Dobson. So stay tuned for that. Now, one last thing I want to say about what's going on with immigration. I mentioned that there are two immigration bills that are going to be voted on this afternoon. Maybe they've already been voted on. I don't know, because I haven't been able to track it. But one of them is the Ryan bill. This is a terrible, absolutely horrible, no good, very bad bill. We do not want the Ryan bill. He's calling it the president's bill. It's not that. It's one of the House bills. It's a terrible bill. And thanks to Mark Meadows getting right in Paul Ryan's grill. He jumped in his chili yesterday. They were pointing their fingers at each other. Mark Meadows' voice was raised. People could hear him in the balcony. And he was getting on Mark Ryan for fudging with that immigration bill, the Goodlatte bill. It's a good bill. It provides a wall. It provides funding for the wall. It mandates E-Verify. There's no amnesty of any kind under the Goodlatte bill. It's a good bill. But they fiddled with it and changed it. And because Mark Meadows pressed Paul Ryan, he reintroduced today to go. He said, we'll go back to the original Goodlatte text. So assuming that was done, and with these jokers, you just never know. Assuming that was done, then the Goodlatte bill voted on this afternoon is an excellent bill. It's the bill that we want to go forward. So we'll see how all of that happens. Now, a couple of quick sound bites on the Mueller investigation to give you the latest developments there. Here is Rudy Giuliani, and he's talking now about some of the effect or the implications of this Inspector General's report, and I think he's exactly right about everything he says in this soundbite.
And they have now been caught. The texts are there. You can read them. You have to be an idiot not to realize they're totally biased. And the Mueller investigation is built around them. Strzok, after all, was the lead investigator that Mueller selected. Now it turns out that there are two of the unnamed people who were texting equally horrible things about the president with an equal amount of bias, are presently part, I believe this is correct, although this is just a report, they may be part of the Mueller team. We will not know that until Mueller is investigated. As I said the other night, the investigators now need to be investigated if we're going to see justice here. And I'd be darned if we're going to go forward with any kind of cooperation with them if I think there's any doubt that these people are trying to frame him. And I'm beginning not only to doubt it, I'm beginning to believe it.
Believe it that this whole Mueller investigation was a sophisticated effort, clumsy in its implementation, but sophisticated in concept to frame Donald Trump. You know, I'm looking at a story here on freebeacon.com by Bill Gertz, who does great journalism on national security issues. And the point that he makes is you had the same bent people, the same corrupt people that are running the Hillary investigation that gave her a complete pass on 16 or 17 blatantly illegal activities on her part, gave her a complete pass. No reasonable prosecutor would take this to court. Gave her the same people then got transferred right over to the Trump-Russia investigation, the same people that proved their bias in favor of Hillary Clinton, exonerating her when she should be in prison right now. She should be at Leavenworth right now for what she did with classified information. And then these same people, we're going to expect them to be even-handed and fair when it comes to Donald Trump. No, they are out there trying to frame him. You know, and Bill Gertz says, look, there's, I don't know how many employees there are in the FBI, but you got enough employees there, experienced people, that you don't have to use the same group of tainted people, corrupt people, bent people to do both investigations unless you've got an agenda in mind. So it looks like to me, I have not heard anybody say this, but it looks to me like James Comey is in all of this because he's the one that's appointing the same people now to investigate both situations. And he knows the bias of these people here. I mean, he's been reading their texts, seeing their texts. He knows that. And so the same people that were bent with Hillary are expecting them to be fair with Donald Trump. I don't think so. Now, here's Mike Rogers, clip number 9. He's a Republican from Alabama. And the question here is whether bias played a role in the investigation, the Mueller investigation, or not the Mueller investigation, but the Trump-Russia investigation, the start of that thing on the part of the FBI. Here's what he said.
It's obvious it did, and we knew it before these text messages came out. We could see by the action that the FBI was taking that they had a bias. Now that we've got these text messages and we know for a fact that they were using their jobs, their positions in the FBI to try to keep President Trump from being elected and trying to initiate this probe, those are bases for being fired. We shouldn't be talking about any further discussion about whether or not they should be fired. We definitely should shut down this probe, which we already spent an enormous amount of money and over a year on, to no avail. It's time to stop it.
And here's Trey Gowdy. So he said, look, it's clear there was bias. There's bias on every single page of that report, 565 pages, bias on every single page. There's no question that bias had a part. It was seminal to the launching of the investigation into Donald Trump. This thing ought to be stopped. This thing ought to be put to bed. We ought to bury it in the deepest part of the sea. We've spent millions and millions and millions of dollars, somewhere between $10 and $20 million we've dumped into the pants of these hotsy-totsy lawyers that Mueller recruited, most of whom, the majority of whom, are Democrat donors. And they've just gotten rich. I don't know what they were getting paid, but they are making bank off of a nothing burger, off of something that was nothing there to begin with. Never should have been started. Started on faulty premises to begin with because there was no crime even indicated, which you have to do by law in order to convene a special counsel investigation. Now here is Trey Gowdy, clip number 10, again on whether Peter Strzok bias played a part in launching the Mueller investigation.
Well, it's the seminal question. If you look at the chronology, of course, in late July of 2016 is when the Russia probe began. And you're not 2 weeks into it before Peter Strzok is saying we'll stop it, with the it being the presidency. We're not 2 weeks into it before he's talking about an insurance policy to make sure Donald Trump is never the president. So keep in mind, He's 2 weeks into an investigation, and he's already talking about impeaching the target of his investigation. They hadn't done anything at that point. I mean, 2 weeks, the paperwork's not even processed, but yet he's already reached his conclusion on what the outcome of that investigation is. Fast forward to when he's put on the Mueller probe, and he's talking about how important this is and how momentous it is, and he's got to fix and finish what he started with the Hillary Clinton investigation. I have never, in 20 years being a prosecutor, seen a law enforcement agent with this amount of animus and bias towards a target, and I hope and pray he comes next week and portrays himself as a victim.
Because that's what Strzok is trying to do. I'm the victim here, Peter Strzok is trying to say. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm the victim. And Trey Gowdy says, man, I hope and pray that he comes in here next week and he tries to paint himself as a victim, because I'm ready for that. He's going to get ripped from top to bottom if he tries to paint himself as a victim. The evidence is clearly, manifestly against him. So, you got a couple of good guys there. You've got Mike Rogers, representative from Alabama, and you've got Trey Gowdy, who's a pretty sharp guy, former prosecutor. And then I'm going to close with this piece by Andy McCarthy in today's National Review. And he says the same logic that spared FBI and Justice Department officials harsher treatment in Michael Horowitz's report should inoculate the president. In other words, if Michael Horowitz, remember, he gets to the end of his report and say, hey, I didn't find any bias here. If you use the same standard that Michael Horowitz used to talk about all the FBI agents that were involved in this, despite bias on page after page after page, then he concludes, no, I didn't see any bias here, then he's got to let Trump off the hook, because there's far more evidence of that kind of bias and corruption on the part of the FBI and DOJ. They haven't attached anything to Donald Trump. So if he's going to give the FBI agents, DOJ people, a pass, a no bias, even though it's manifest, then he's obligated to give the same thing to Donald Trump. So we'll see if they do that, but it's a 4-page article. I will not read the whole thing to you, but I do want to read the closing paragraph. Andy McCarthy is a really sober guy. He's a smart guy. I try to read just about everything that he writes because he's a brilliant guy, very well trained as a lawyer. He's the guy that put the blind shake behind bars for the first World Trade Center bombing. Now here's what he says in the conclusion of his piece. Now, this is important because of who Andy McCarthy is. This is not some kind of Yahoo out there from the sticks. This is Andy McCarthy, experienced federal prosecutor. Here's what he has to say. The obstruction investigation should be closed. This is obstruction into Donald Trump. Remember, that's all that Mueller's got now is an obstruction of justice investigation. The obstruction investigation should be closed. Should Special Counsel Mueller fail to close it, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein ought to be summoned by Congress to testify specifically on this question. If the Justice Department accepts Inspector General Horowitz's premise that it must not second-guess the discretionary decision-making of FBI and department officials when there are legitimate grounds to support their decisions, on what basis may a special counsel second-guess the President of the United States? When he fired James Comey, he had every constitutional right to do it and abundant grounds to do it on the basis of the Inspector General's report. Anyway, I got ahead of myself there, departed from the text there, and went on a little rant. On what basis may a special counsel second-guess the President's decision-making when, as Rosenstein himself has argued, with respect to Comey, there are legitimate grounds to support the President's decision? So in other words, what Andy McCarthy is saying, he's dead right about this. Look, this obstruction of justice investigation into the President ought to be just bagged. We ought to bag that thing, bury that puppy, because President Trump had every right to do what he did, to fire James Comey, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to pin an obstruction of justice beef on Trump. That's all they've got left. They've got no collusion with Russia. That's a dry hole. So now they're left with this obstruction business, and yet the Inspector General's report makes it very clear that President Trump had abundant reasons. He could fire him for cause for any number of reasons and had the constitutional authority to do it. So Andy McCarthy says, look, it's time to fold up shop. Close this thing down and bury it. Get this thing out of everybody's misery. Well, that's it for today. Don't forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap where God has placed you, and never forget, ladies and gentlemen, we are fighting a winnable war. Stay tuned for a special with James Dobson.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
Dinosaur Soft Tissue. This is Ken Ham, author of the books The Dinosaurs of Eden and D is for Dinosaur. According to evolutionary ideas, dinosaurs went extinct about 65 million years ago, but we continue to find evidence that dinosaurs lived much more recently than that. In 2005, Dr. Mary Schweitzer made the first popular discovery of soft tissue in a dinosaur bone. She found red blood cells and blood vessels in the femur of a supposedly 65 million year old T-Rex. Now, we know soft tissue chemically breaks down. It can't last for millions of years. This discovery doesn't fit with the evolutionary story, but it does support the biblical account of creation. Starting with Genesis, we know God created everything, including dinosaurs, in 6 days just thousands of years ago.
Get answers to your questions about dinosaurs when you visit AnswersRadio.com. And while you're there, subscribe to receive email insights from Ken Ham. AnswersRadio.com.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association. In God we trust.